What if I told you that some of the most jaw-dropping encounters in modern warfare have nothing to do with enemy combatants or explosive devices? What if the real terror came from something far more ancient, something that defies everything we thought we knew about the battlefields of the 21st century? Today, we're diving deep into testimonies that have been whispered in military circles for decades. Stories so bizarre that careers have been built on keeping them quiet. Stories that challenge the very fabric of what we consider possible in our modern world. Before we begin, I need you to understand something. The accounts you're about to hear come from decorated veterans, men and women who've served multiple tours, individuals whose credibility in matters of life and death has never been questioned. These aren't campfire ghost stories. These are classified encounters that somehow found their way into the light. Let's start with a location that has earned a reputation unlike any other on Earth. The Hindu Kush mountains have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. From Alexander the Great to the Soviet Union, this landscape has swallowed armies whole, earning its ominous nickname as the graveyard of empires. But what makes this terrain so formidable isn't just the altitude or the harsh climate. Veterans returning from deployment speak of an otherworldly quality to these mountains, as if the very rocks hold secrets that predate recorded history. The peaks stretch endlessly into clouds that seem to whisper warnings to those who dare venture too deep into their shadows. When coalition forces first established their presence in this region following the September 11th attacks, they encountered resistance that went beyond insurgent tactics. The mountains themselves seemed alive, harboring mysteries that would challenge everything military personnel thought they understood about the nature of conflict. Picture this. A routine reconnaissance mission in the rugged terrain south of Kandahar. The year is 2002, and tensions are running high as special operations teams sweep through valleys that haven't seen outsiders for generations. What began as a standard search and rescue operation for a missing patrol would become one of the most classified encounters in modern military history. The team leader, whose identity remains protected under layers of security clearance, would later describe an atmosphere of dread that seemed to emanate from the cave systems they were investigating. Radio communications became erratic, equipment malfunctioned without explanation, and then came the discovery that would haunt these soldiers for the rest of their lives. Deep within a network of caves that seemed to extend infinitely into the mountain's core, they encountered something that shouldn't exist. Not an insurgent, not a weapon cache, but a being that stood at a height that defied human biology, possessing features that belonged more to mythology than to any military briefing they'd ever received. The encounter lasted mere minutes, but the psychological impact would ripple through the special operations community for years to come. What they witnessed challenged fundamental assumptions about what inhabits the remote corners of our planet. The physical description that emerged from debriefings reads like something from ancient texts rather than modern military reports. We're talking about a humanoid entity that towered above even the tallest soldiers, reaching heights that would make professional basketball players look like children. But height was just the beginning of the anomalies. The creature displayed anatomical features that suggested either an entirely different evolutionary path or something far more mysterious. Multiple witnesses reported hands that bore additional digits, a characteristic that appears in various cultural mythologies but has never been documented in any known human population. The being's hair color and texture defied typical human variation, appearing almost luminescent in the dim cave lighting. Most unsettling of all was an intelligence behind its eyes, a consciousness that seemed to recognize the intruders not as equals, but as something far beneath its understanding. Combat veterans, individuals trained to assess threats and respond with deadly precision, found themselves paralyzed not by fear of death, but by the recognition that they were in the presence of something that existed outside their comprehension of the natural world. What happened next reveals as much about military protocol as it does about the extraordinary nature of the encounter. Within hours of the team return to base, intelligence officers descended upon the scene with a level of urgency typically reserved for nuclear incidents or terrorist plots. The soldiers involved found themselves isolated from their units, subjected to extensive debriefings that felt more like interrogations. Medical examinations were conducted, psychological evaluations were ordered, and then came the paperwork that would ensure their silence for decades to come. Non-disclosure agreements of unprecedented scope were placed before these combat veterans. The language was clear. Any discussion of the events would result in immediate court-martial, loss of benefits, and potential criminal prosecution. These weren't standard operational security measures. This was something far more comprehensive. The official reports that emerged from the incident were so heavily redacted that they resembled abstract art more than military documentation. References to unusual contact and non-standard encounter protocols were the only hints that something extraordinary had occurred. But secrets have a way of spreading, especially among communities built on brotherhood and shared experience. Other units began reporting similar encounters throughout the region. Drone operators monitoring remote valleys started capturing footage that didn't make it into official reports. Forward operating bases established protocols for dealing with anomalous contacts that had nothing to do with insurgent activity. Veterans returning from deployment carried with them stories that they couldn't officially tell, but couldn't entirely forget. Support groups that typically focused on combat trauma began hearing accounts that didn't fit standard PTSD profiles. These weren't flashbacks to firefights or IED explosions. These were recurring memories of encounters with entities that challenged the very nature of reality. Mental health professionals found themselves dealing with symptoms they'd never encountered in textbooks. How do you treat someone haunted by something that officially doesn't exist? How do you provide therapy for experiences that can't be acknowledged by the very institution that witnessed them? As unmanned aerial vehicle operations expanded throughout the region, a new category of witness emerged. Drone operators, safely stationed thousands of miles from the actual combat zone, began reporting visual anomalies that couldn't be explained by equipment malfunction or enemy activity. These remote pilots, controlling million-dollar aircraft through satellite links, started documenting movement patterns in cave systems that defied explanation. Thermal imaging revealed heat signatures that didn't match any known animal or human activity. Motion sensors detected movement at scales that suggested something far larger than expected wildlife. The advantage of drone surveillance is its objective nature. Cameras don't hallucinate. Sensors don't suffer from combat stress. Yet the footage being captured began accumulating in classified databases, creating a body of evidence that couldn't be dismissed as imagination or trauma-induced hallucinations. Operations centers that monitored multiple drone feeds simultaneously reported coordinated sightings across different valleys, suggesting not isolated incidents, but evidence of a population that had learned to avoid human detection through centuries of practice. What makes these modern encounters particularly fascinating is their alignment with historical accounts that span millennia. Ancient texts from the region describe similar beings, suggesting that what coalition forces encountered wasn't new, but rather the latest chapter in a story that predates recorded civilization. Archaeological evidence from the Hindu Kush region includes artifacts and structures that seem designed for inhabitants of unusual size. Local tribal legends passed down through generations speak of mountain dwellers who prefer solitude but will defend their territory when threatened. These weren't primitive superstitions born from ignorance. These were detailed cultural memories preserved by societies that had coexisted with these entities for thousands of years. The oral traditions included specific behavioral patterns, territorial boundaries, and interaction protocols that suggested intimate knowledge of non-human intelligence. When modern military forces arrived in the region, they unknowingly entered a landscape where two vastly different forms of consciousness had maintained an uneasy coexistence for generations. The encounters that followed weren't first contact. They were violations of ancient agreements that local populations had honored for centuries. Modern warfare brought unprecedented surveillance capabilities to one of Earth's most remote regions. Satellite imagery, night vision technology, and advanced communication systems created a monitoring network that could detect activities previously hidden from human observation. This technological blanket didn't just reveal insurgent movements. It began documenting behaviors and patterns that suggested the presence of entities that had successfully avoided human contact for generations. Heat signatures that appeared and disappeared without logical explanation, communication frequencies that interfered with military equipment, electronic failures that clustered around specific geographical locations. The marriage of ancient mysteries with cutting-edge technology created a unique window into phenomena that had previously existed only in legend and whispered accounts. For the first time in human history, we had the tools to document encounters with entities that had remained hidden since the dawn of civilization. The psychological toll on military personnel extended far beyond typical combat stress. These individuals had to reconcile their training and worldview with experiences that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality itself. Combat veterans are trained to deal with human threats, mechanical failures, and environmental hazards. They're not prepared to encounter entities that exist outside accepted biological parameters. The cognitive dissonance created by such encounters often proved more challenging than traditional battlefield trauma. Support networks within the military struggled to address issues they couldn't officially acknowledge. How do you help someone process an experience that can't be discussed? How do you provide context for encounters that exist outside established psychological frameworks? Many veterans found themselves dealing with isolation that went beyond typical post-deployment adjustment. They carried memories that couldn't be shared with family members, friends, or even other service members who hadn't been present during the encounters. The question that haunts these accounts isn't just what happened, but why the response was so comprehensive and immediate. The level of security applied to these incidents suggests either a massive cover-up or recognition that public knowledge of such encounters could have catastrophic consequences. Consider the implications if such entities were confirmed to exist. Religious institutions would face challenges to fundamental doctrines. Scientific establishments would need to revise basic assumptions about human evolution and planetary history. Government agencies would confront questions about what else they've known and concealed from public knowledge. The military's response might not have been about hiding the truth, but about protecting society from truths it wasn't prepared to handle. The careful management of information could represent an attempt to prevent panic, social upheaval, and the collapse of institutions that form the foundation of modern civilization. These encounters in Afghanistan weren't isolated incidents limited to a single geographical region. Similar accounts have emerged from military operations worldwide, suggesting a global phenomenon that transcends cultural and geographical boundaries. Remote locations on every continent have produced comparable testimonies from military personnel, scientific researchers, and indigenous populations. The consistency of descriptions across different cultures and time periods suggests either a remarkably persistent form of shared delusion or evidence of entities that have coexisted with humanity throughout our species' development. The implications extend beyond military operations into questions about human history, evolution, and our understanding of consciousness itself. If such entities exist, their presence challenges fundamental assumptions about planetary development and the nature of intelligence. Years have passed since the initial encounters, but the questions they raised remain unanswered. Veterans continue to carry memories they can't officially discuss. Researchers continue to analyze evidence they can't publicly acknowledge. And somewhere in the remote mountains of Afghanistan, entities that predate human civilization continue their ancient existence. The story doesn't end with military withdrawal or changing political situations. These entities, if they exist, have survived the rise and fall of countless human civilizations. They've witnessed empires come and go while maintaining their presence in landscapes that remain largely unchanged despite humanity's technological advancement. What we're left with isn't just a military mystery, but a fundamental challenge to our understanding of what it means to share this planet with forms of consciousness that exist outside our accepted parameters of possibility. The testimonies continue to accumulate in classified databases. The witnesses continue to carry their memories in silence, and the truth, whatever it might be, continues to hide in the shadows of mountains that have guarded their secrets since before human civilization began to dream of conquering the unconquerable. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of these stories isn't what they tell us about mysterious entities, but what they reveal about the limits of human knowledge and the vast mysteries that still exist in a world we thought we had fully explored and understood. The soldiers and drone operators who experienced these encounters didn't just witness something extraordinary. They became part of a story that connects modern military operations to ancient mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about the nature of reality itself. In the end, these accounts force us to confront a humbling truth. Despite all our technological advancement and scientific progress, there are still corners of our world that hold secrets capable of shattering our most fundamental assumptions about what is and isn't possible on the planet we call home. If you've heard the echoes in these mountains, you understand. This isn't just folklore. It's a reminder that our maps are incomplete and our certainty is a lie. Subscribe if you're ready to question the edges of what we call real. Because the world is older, stranger, and far less empty than we were taught. We'll see you in the next episode. If the silence hasn't already answered you,